Hello, all, and welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown. We're going to let this roll for a little bit. I don't know why I started doing the intro there. I never do, but we're going to get started here in just a minute. Hey, 2 weeks in a row, me and Tom Hollingsworth are going to be doing the rundown. He's over there. And we're excited to bring you the IT news of the week if you're just catching us right now. I see we've got some people watching. Someone left us some hearty emojis. They must really love us, and it's nice to feel loved. And Tom is making some sort of shape. It looks like a peach, maybe, with his hands. I'm not sure. I can't. Okay, we're gonna get started in just a second here, and I can't wait to cut all this out when we publish this. All right, here we go. Hello, all, and welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown, your weekly look at the IT news of the week. I'm your host, Rich Straffolino, and joining me over on the other side of cyberspace, I did it again. I pointed to the wrong side. Is the one, the only, Tom Hollingsworth. Tom, welcome to the stream, the show, and to part of my life.
Oh, well, Rich, I'm always happy to be a part of your life, no matter how heart-shaped it may be.
or as deliciously sweet as a fine Georgia peach. We're going to get started with some acquisition news and a little, acquisitions always interesting, but this one particularly because it's the first ever acquisition by this company. Pure Storage announced it's acquiring StoreReduce. They are looking to bolster their object storage play with the move. StoreReduce offers a software-defined storage platform. Shocking in this day and age for unstructured data. So pretty much that's what you use object storage for, is dumping a bunch of unstructured data into. Pure Storage, not necessarily a major player in the object storage space, but they are a big player in the, hey, we need super fast storage for a whole bunch of data. So that could be very interesting and could have some implications for the larger object storage market. It's always interesting to me, Tom, that object storage companies want to throw a filer on top of their rack or their stack or whatnot, and companies like Pure Storage are kind of always dipping their toes or seemingly are expanding into the object storage, realizing that's kind of where the future is. But two questions: one, big shakeup or just kind of filling out the portfolio, and two, how is a tech company that's been around since 2009 not bought another company till now?
Okay, so one, this is filling out their platform, and the reason why is cloud. This is the only way they're going to be able to compete in cloud storage going forward. Everybody else has some kind of an object storage story to tell, so this is Pure kind of filling in the gaps. And two, why is this such big news? It's only been 9 years since Pure's been around. Well, you got to remember, Pure took a lot of money to get all of their stuff out the door. This is their expansion, if you will, because now that they've taken a lot of money and they've returned some of it to the investors thanks to all of their financial stuff on the back end, now they're finally free and clear enough to go pick up some companies to start filling in those gaps and things like that. So this is going to pay off in the long run for their investors, one would hope. But it's not all that uncommon for companies to sit around, especially in today's age, because when we think about acquisition heavy companies like IBM, Cisco, Dell, EMC, those are companies that have been around forever. Pure is part of that unicorn mentality of let's just take as many funding rounds as we can until someone makes us give that money back.
Yeah, and kind of to your point there, this was announced along with their Q2 revenue, and they actually beat the street by about $8 or $9 million, or recorded revenue of $308.9 million in the quarter. So yeah, definitely kind of they're slowly evening out to that that giant capital investment, and finally have maybe some room to play as they start paying off some of those debts. So yeah, interesting for the company. It's not to say though that they haven't had an object storage story to tell in the market. I think this is definitely a refinement in that space, but to your point, that's definitely where there could be some potential growth. I do wonder, they've made a big push this year at Pure Accelerate, that they're kind of going all NVMe on all the things all the time. They've always been obviously all flash, and now just going very heavy on NVMe. I wonder if high performance object storage may be an oxymoron, but if anyone can pull it off, maybe Pure can.
Mm-hmm.
All right, some interesting chip news. We got a kind of a pair of stories here, kind of giving a hint of what's coming along the silicon path, as it were. ARM publicly published its architecture roadmap for the next few years, kind of the first time they've ever really given this deep of a look into the future. The company plans to expand its Cortex A76 IP with 2 new cores in 2018 and 2019, respectively, codenamed Deimos and Hercules. So one of those names I recognize. They're expecting to hit about a 15% performance increase on average each year. Supposedly, the Deimos core will hit about is expected to hit a little bit higher performance impact, and then they're going to do a process die shift down on Hercules, and so it'll be slightly less, probably more focused on power performance at that point. But really interestingly, these are going to be processed on 10, 7, and 5 nanometer processes, which is kind of insane, especially since Intel has had such problems kind of moving beyond 14 nanometers with a lot of their fabs. ARM expects the initial 3 gigahertz A76 designs to be able to match the single core performance of a Intel Core i5 7300U. So a low power performance, but kind of in the middle of their performance pack. And they'd be able to beat that running at 3.5 gigahertz and significantly using about a third of Intel's TDP on that design. The other kind of differentiator they're going to go for, other than low power and equal performance, is that all of these are, of course, going to have 5G connectivity kind of built on the SoC. That's where ARM has really been making their play in moving into more of the laptop market. We've seen with the Snapdragon, I think it's, the 835 and the 850 platforms. These aren't necessarily the most high performance, but you have always on connectivity, which can be a differentiator for a lot of markets. So, Tom, where I know you've been skeptical about your next laptop going to be having an ARM processor, but really aggressive performance increases, especially as we've seen Intel's performance curve kind of flatten out ever since the death of their kind of TikTok platform or methodology.
Yeah, so the only reason you publish a roadmap like this, if you've never done it before, is because someone's going to take advantage of that roadmap, and they want to be able to point to say, hey, this is where the things are coming. And when you look at everything that you just discussed, low TDP, mid-range performance, small die sizes, always on connectivity. Boy, that'd make a really awesome laptop, wouldn't it? Maybe something in silver, maybe aluminum, really thin, high resolution screen. Yeah, I think honestly what you're looking at here, there's a lot of speculation about whether or not Apple is going to be going with an ARM processor in the future MacBooks, because they're getting fed up with Intel. And like you said, Intel's having huge problems shrinking from 14 to 10 nanometer because their chips are just too complicated. Whereas ARM's going the route of, we'll just make one that's a little less complicated. And if they can get their die sizes down to 5 nanometers, think about that for a minute. 5 nanometers. That's ridiculously small. That's perfect for a laptop.
Well, at that point, I have to wonder about the physics of it, is that the transistors might be so close. I mean, they're so infinitesimally close together that you may run into a point where increasing frequency doesn't has less and less of a payoff. Obviously, that's a problem of physics, and I will leave that to the fine people of ARM to deal with. But what's interesting, as compared to Intel, because Intel's and AMD and a lot of the other big chip makers are very public with their roadmaps, but they own kind of that end to end, whereas ARM is just like, here's a design, anybody can do anything that they. I mean, you can license this from us and then kind of do what you want with it. Like you mentioned, Apple is a licensee, Qualcomm is a licensee. So that's actually kind of unusual for me that they haven't released this this comprehensive of a roadmap before, considering that they're a chip IP firm for hire, essentially. So interesting. That may be a little bit of a fishing expedition, or it could be that they see that Intel's maybe not in the strongest position that they've ever been, and if they can win over another couple customers, maybe that helps as well. Speaking of Intel, though, we also got some kind of details on what's going on with some of their server chips. Excuse me. We got some details on the new Xeons that are coming out. They're going to be codenamed Cascade Lake in this next generation coming up. If you haven't been following Intel Xeon updates, you haven't missed much because they haven't updated much. They did a whole bunch of renaming. Now they're all gold, silver, and bronze and stuff like that, as opposed to V6 or V5 or whatnot. But they haven't really had a major architecture update since 2015. And they're still using these Skylake designs that were around at that time. They've made some process performance improvements. I think they shrunk the die sizes. They all went down to an improved 14 nanometer process, but not a significant overhaul in a couple of years. It's a little unusual. Cascade Lake notably will feature better ML performance thanks to a built-in AVX 512 unit, which has numbers and letters. So I assume that's very good. It'll have overall improved performance and efficiency, although this will be mitigated a little bit because the architecture was designed pre-Meltdown Inspector, so they had to implement some updates there to obviously prevent that from being an issue. The good news is it's been patched. Bad news is it was already kind of built into the architecture and it was kind of too late to change that. So bummer. The other major news, though, is that it will have full support for Intel's Optane DIMMs. This is their storage class memory solution that will live directly kind of in where you would put it right alongside your memory. It'll support up to 1 DIMM per memory channel. So if you're on a 6-channel socket, you can support, and you have 512 gigabyte Optane DIMMs. That equals out to a little over 3 terabytes of Optane in your memory channel, which is really cool if you want to throw an entire database in there and you don't have to worry about sharding it and distributing it across all the storage with all the latency that involves there. Has really a big impact for big data applications. So kind of cool there. Tom, has this been worth the wait for a lot of people? I know it's kind of irrelevant, right? You're on the Intel Xeon train. You're either going to update or you're not, I guess. What's the killer feature here? Is this going to is better ML performance? That to me feels like that's nice, but you're just going to throw a GPU in there anyway, right?
Yeah, there's no killer performance enhancement here. They're chasing feature sets because they basically topped out. They can't get any faster. They can't really get it any smaller because we've just talked about that. They're having trouble shrinking their process. So ML, yeah, people want to buy ML, but they don't want to pay $9,000 for a graphics card to do that. So we'll give them a little bit of that. Well, they don't want to pay a lot for really really fast storage. We'll give them a little bit of that Optane stuff. They like that, right? That's cool. Your solution's in search of a problem right now. Yeah, I can do a little bit of ML, but I can't do a lot. I can shard. I don't have to shard one database, but when you look at the size of what people are doing with Spark, 3 terabytes ain't enough. You're going to upgrade. You're going to justify upgrading this. No. These are going to go to cloud providers where they can rent these things out and get their money back, basically.
Well, the good news here for Intel is supposedly they've been able to ship these Optane DIMMs in pretty high volume, and they are seeing a pretty big uptake from everything I've seen, like you're saying, from those cloud service providers and larger customers that are really interested in this. And the idea of being able to move data as literally as close to the processor as possible, you can't get much closer than putting it in your DRAM channel right there. That to me is very interesting. We've seen a number of companies kind of try and do this in either non-volatile memory solutions. The one company that always comes to mind for this is the now defunct Diablo Technologies. They kind of threw a NAND drive basically on a memory DIMM and kind of use that as a smart cache. Optane is a much more sophisticated solution to that. So I think there is definitely a lot of interest in that. I don't know, though, if that's not something that, over time, clearly that's something that is going to be on everyone's roadmap, whether you're Intel, ARM, some other methodology. So, yeah, I have to agree with you there. Yeah. All right. News from Twitter. Now, you may say, hey, Rich, this isn't really an IT story, but I think this has a really interesting kind of lesson maybe to be learned for a lot of technology companies out there. Twitter announced that they're finally ending support for key third-party APIs, removing support for power push notifications and auto refreshing on timelines. Basically, this makes a lot of third-party Twitter clients way less useful just because you're going to have to constantly be manually refreshing them to get any updates. The company had originally planned to remove the APIs on June 19th, but delayed seemingly due to public backlash, although just having killed it 2 months later doesn't seem to be that big of a deal. The company said that they wanted to focus on native app development as the rationale for the change, and had started to signal up to as long as 6 years ago that third parties should really not try to emulate a native Twitter app experience via these APIs. But Tom, for me, Twitter has always had this weirdly antagonistic relationship with a lot of their third parties who have brought a lot of functionality to the platform. I mean, if you remember way back in the day, Twitter didn't have any support for adding pictures or anything like that. So you had companies like YFrog and TwitPic and all of these now defunct companies, or much less relevant companies that brought this functionality, and Twitter was like, hey, great idea. By the way, we're going to buy one of you or implement it ourselves and put it on our platform. Same kind of thing with these third-party clients, where there was a market need there due to the relatively unsophisticated native Twitter experience. Third-party clients come in, create a fairly novel and unique something that Twitter users really wanted, and now Twitter's coming in and killing support for those APIs. Is this a lesson to be learned for anybody that's building a business on the top of, I mean, as more and more companies are increasingly, relying on open APIs, to kind of make business happen? Is this a lesson to, one, diversify, I guess, what platforms you work on, and two, that, building on someone else's platform fundamentally leaves you at their whims?
It does. And this is Twitter trying to regain control of their platform because, well, as it turns out, when you're beholden to a whole bunch of quarterly investors, the only thing they care about is money. The only way you can make money is to display ads and promoted tweets. Well, I wonder if the power user base that uses third-party clients that can't display those aren't really contributing to your money problems. And that's basically what this is. So yeah, Twitter will be happy to shut off the APIs. And I get that. They're 6 or 7 years old at this point. Maintaining 6-year-old code isn't really that advantageous for the developer group. That would make sense if Twitter didn't suddenly decide that, hey, we do have new APIs. We have an enterprise class APIs. We'd love to get you on. It's $11 per user per month. That's ridiculous. This is a huge problem for Twitter for one reason only. No one wants to use your stupid website. Let's be perfectly frank about this. And yeah, Jack, if you're listening, pay attention, buddy. Your website's crap. You kill off every client you buy because you hate them, because you don't want to maintain other people's code. I don't want to use your stupid mobile app. It doesn't thread conversations correctly. The smartest thing that you can do is hire the Tapbots team en masse, make them have them make clients for you so you don't screw them around every 6 months with API changes. And you don't kill off their stupid client. If anybody out there is using TweetDeck, you know what I'm talking about. You know that little pull to refresh thing that you can do in every app that's been created in the last 8 years? Yeah, thank Lauren Britcher for that. He created it when he made Tweety. You know where Tweety is today? In the garbage can.
Tom, I feel like you're passionate about this, and it kind of came through a little bit.
Yeah, you know what, Jack, you're no better than Dick Costello when he created that stupid Dick bar that was trying to get trending topics in front of everybody's faces so that he could make a little bit of extra money.
Now, but Tom, what I'm thinking of specifically with this is, I've seen a company that comes to mind is someone like Docker, who is, very much dependent on, third parties kind of building out some of the functionalities that, maybe aren't native to their platform. I mean, they've done a good job of building out their enterprise edition, adding some additional functionality. They've bought a couple companies, to kind of add some sophistication to what they can do with storage. Are they going to be in a similar situation to Twitter in a couple of years, where they start, these companies that they've acquired, they start rolling out these features and killing or making it hard for companies that offer a similar functionality to kind of compete with their native offerings? Exactly.
All you have to do is go back and look for Sherlock in Apple keynotes. There's a reason why that's a verb now. You've been Sherlocked, is because first-party developers will always sample the ecosystem of people who've created tools to make their systems easier to use, steal all those ideas, make them first-party, and then you're out of a job. The companies that have been able to pivot from tool to tool to tool, they do a pretty good job. But I mean, you're not Marco Arment. You can't just keep pivoting from newsreaders to podcast apps to microblogging sites.
It does seem that there is this weird tension where everyone that bills themselves as, quote unquote, an open platform inevitably just wants to actually be a service, and they just can't do it at the time. And so I think that's where Twitter is right now, where, they want to be a really end-to-end service, and being an open platform is now just an inconvenience for them. All right, and finally, very exciting news. Speaking of Apple, as we were a couple minutes ago, we have, according to Apple Whisperer and Bloomberg journalist Mark Gurman, Apple is working on products people seem to actually be asking for. There's supposedly an updated Retina MacBook Air in the works, supposed to be coming in at around $1,000. Keeping the same basic design, I'm sure there will be far less useful ports on it. but finally bringing high resolution display to the hallowed computing device. Interestingly, the long forgotten Mac Mini is also supposed to get an update with an eye to making it appealing more to pro users. Now, Tom, I don't think I've ever told you this, but I have this whole idea that the most awesome Mac you could get is something I like to call the Mac Modular, where instead of getting, your giant Mac Pro or something like that, you have a Mac Mini that just has a whole bunch of Thunderbolt 3 ports, and you can then, with support for external GPUs and all sorts of external, super fast, you could put NVMe storage over, PCIe connected over Thunderbolt 3. You could have this whole modular Mac system where, it has just a pro level or at least a desktop class GPU. You connect an external GPU if you need it. You could add additional super fast NVMe storage on top of there, and you can kind of customize a little bit your Mac experience. I know customizing all sorts of external stuff, it's not elegant. Is this ever going to happen? And what does a pro Mac Mini mean? Is this a return of the Mac Mini server? I hope, maybe.
Well, you're not going to see this as long as Johnny Ive is around, because I believe that man actually hates cables. I think that's just his thing. He despises wires. A Pro Mac Mini would basically in Mac Pro. That's what they're looking at. They're looking at like a desktop. Servers going away. They actually have killed off support for OS 10 server in Mojave. You can't get it anymore. So what they're really trying to do is they're trying to appeal to that market that doesn't want to buy an iMac, and they don't want to buy an iMac Pro, which I wish I could. They need, I'm sitting here and I'm lovingly patting my 2012 Mac Mini that's still doing horsepower work on a daily basis, because it's the best solution I could find for what I wanted to do. And they were going for gangbusters prices when they announced the new Mac Minis, which sucked a little bit because there were no removable parts in them. So the issue that you're going to run into is, the Retina MacBook, or I'm sorry, the Retina MacBook Air, no brainer, should have done it a long time ago. The MacBook, the one USB-C port MacBook is, no, that's not a replacement. The Mac Mini is going to appeal to some people, but not a lot. And I hope it pays off for them in the future. But you better get ready to sell a few thousand of these, not tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, just a few thousand to the hobbyist market, if you will.
What are the odds you think that this will have that, that combined Intel AMD same silicon, that seems to be a reasonably powered, desktop powered, Core i5, Core i7 with some, mid-range graphical power, all in a very tight thermal envelope, doesn't take up a lot of space. What are we talking? Do you think there's any possibility of that? Because that's kind of my best case scenario for this.
25%. The only reason I put it that low is because AMD seems to be doing a lot of their innovation in the graphics APU space absent of Intel. So I don't see the solution that AMD would give Intel being something that they would like to go with. I imagine Intel wants to go with a completely on Intel solution. They don't want to have to shell out to AMD for anything.
Yeah, and especially on probably their highest margin, consumer customer at the same time. All right, well, that just about does it for the Gestalt IT Rundown. We're here every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, Tom, I think I'll be flying solo next week. You'll be out at the VM World. Is that correct?
Yes, I will be at the VM World in the Vegas, and I will be the hot all week long.
Well, try and stay inside, stay cool, stay virtually cool all week long out in the desert. But we'll be back with the Gestalt IT Rundown. Probably have some updates and some news coming out of that show on top of all the other IT news that you can come and know and expect. And you can leave a comment on that video with some more hearty emoji faces. Thank you to Sareth Kumar for leaving that there. Really appreciate it. And any and all emojis are welcome. We always post this also on gestaltit.com, and you can find it on our YouTube channel. Just search for Gestalt IT. Go ahead and like that or subscribe. You like Facebook, you subscribe to YouTube, and you just visit a website, I guess. I don't know. Visit it as much as you want, gestaltit.com. You can find me on Twitter while I still use a third-party client at Mr. Anthropology. You can find Tom at Networking Nerd. Tom, any final words before we leave?
You can have my third-party Twitter client when you pry it from my cold, dead keyboard.
All right. And on that note, until next time we meet, have a super sparkly day.